The blood on Zelda Jameson's hands had dried hours ago, but the crowd in front of the saloon still looked at her like she was something feral and dangerous, their voices rising in mockery as she stood on the dusty main street of Truckee, California, her father's body barely cold in the ground. The men laughed and the women whispered behind their fans, and someone in the back shouted loud enough for everyone to hear, "No man will ever claim her, not after what she done." The year was 1872, and the mountain town had decided her fate before she even had a chance to defend herself. Zelda stood there with her chin high, though her legs shook beneath her worn calico dress. She had shot the man who killed her father, shot him clean through the heart when he came at her with a knife still dripping with her daddy's blood. Self-defense clear as day, but the man she killed had been the nephew of the wealthiest rancher in the territory, and that made all the difference. The sheriff had let her go, couldn't charge her with murder when half a dozen witnesses saw what really happened, but the damage to her reputation was already done. "Murderer," someone hissed, and Zelda flinched despite herself. She was 22 years old, and in one violent night she had lost everything. Her father had been her only family, a simple blacksmith who taught her to read and shoot and think for herself. Now his shop would be sold to pay his debts, and she had nowhere to go, no prospects, no future. The other women in town had made it clear she was not welcome in their respectable homes, not even to work as a housemaid. The men looked at her with either fear or something worse, a predatory gleam that made her skin crawl. "Ain't no decent man gonna want damaged goods like that," another voice called out, followed by cruel laughter. Zelda turned away from them all, her eyes burning with unshed tears she refused to let fall. She would not give them the satisfaction. She walked toward the edge of town, toward the small room above her father's shop, where she had one more night before the new owner took possession. Tomorrow she would have to figure out where to go, what to do. Maybe she could head to Sacramento, try to disappear into a bigger city where no one knew her name or her story. She did not notice the man watching her from beside the general store, his massive frame partially hidden in the shadows. Isaac Thornton had been in town for supplies, his pack horse loaded with flour and salt and coffee, preparing to head back up to his cabin in the high country. He had heard the commotion and stopped to see what the fuss was about, and now he could not seem to look away from the young woman walking through that gauntlet of judgment with her head held high. He knew her story, of course. Everyone within 50 miles knew about the shooting, about how Zelda Jameson had killed Cyrus Blackwell's nephew in her father's shop. Isaac had known her father, Thomas Jameson, a good, honest man who did not deserve to die at the hands of a drunken fool with a knife. He had heard the nephew had been trouble for years, that he had come to collect on a debt that Thomas had already paid, that he had been looking for an excuse to spill blood. Isaac was a mountain man through and through, had been living in the high Sierra Nevada for the better part of 8 years, ever since he returned from the war. He was 30 years old, built like a grizzly bear with broad shoulders thick with muscle from years of chopping wood and hauling water and hunting in terrain that would break lesser men. His dark hair hung past his collar, and his beard was neatly trimmed, framing a face that had seen too much but still held kindness in the eyes. He dressed in buckskin and wool, practical clothes that could withstand the brutal mountain winters. He had come down from the mountains alone, and he had planned to return alone, the way he always did. But something about the sight of that young woman, standing strong despite the vicious words being thrown at her, made him reconsider. Isaac stepped out of the shadows and walked toward the crowd. He was not a man who drew attention to himself, but when he moved, people noticed. He stood 6'4" and weighed well over 200 pounds, most of it solid muscle. His presence commanded respect, even from men who did not know his name. "That is enough," he said, his voice deep and quiet, but it carried. The crowd turned to look at him, and several of the men stepped back instinctively. Isaac had a reputation, though he had never sought it. He was known as a fair man, but not one to be trifled with. "This ain't your business, Thornton," one of the men said, but his voice lacked conviction. "I am making it my business," Isaac replied. He looked past them to where Zelda had stopped walking, her back still to the crowd. Miss Jameson defended herself and her father. "Any one of you would have done the same. There is no shame in that. She killed a man," someone protested. "She killed a man who was trying to kill her," Isaac corrected. The law agreed. "Now you all need to go on about your business and leave her be." The crowd muttered and grumbled, but they began to disperse. Isaac's word carried weight, and no one wanted to challenge him directly. He was not a violent man by nature, but he had a quiet strength that made even the loudest braggart think twice. Zelda turned around slowly, her green eyes meeting his across the dusty street. She looked exhausted, her face pale beneath the freckles that dusted her nose and cheeks. Her auburn hair was coming loose from its braid, and there was dirt on her dress. But Isaac thought she was the most beautiful thing he had seen in years. "Thank you," she said quietly as he approached. Her voice was hoarse, probably from crying or screaming or both. "You did not have to do that." "Yes, I did," Isaac said simply. He stopped a respectful distance away, not wanting to crowd her. "I knew your father. He was a good man. I am sorry for your loss." Zelda's composure cracked just a little, and she had to look away, blinking rapidly. "Thank you. He spoke of you, said you were one of the few honest men he knew." Isaac felt something warm unfold in his chest at that. Thomas Jameson's good opinion had been worth something. "What will you do now?" She shrugged, the gesture trying for casual but falling short. "I do not know. I have to be out of the shop by tomorrow. I thought maybe Sacramento, try to find work there. Do you have money for the trip?" "Some, not much." Isaac was quiet for a long moment, weighing his words carefully. What he was about to suggest was bold, possibly foolish, but he could not shake the feeling that this was important, that she was important. "I have a cabin up in the mountains. It is remote, about 20 miles from here. I live alone, have for years. It is good land, and I do well enough trapping and hunting. I come down for supplies a few times a year." Zelda looked at him, confusion clear on her face. She did not understand where he was going with this. "I could use help," Isaac continued. "The cabin is big enough for two. I built it that way, thinking someday I might have a family, but that never happened. You could come with me, work as a housekeeper if you want to think of it that way. You would be safe there. No one would bother you." "You are offering me a job?" Zelda asked carefully. "As your housekeeper, I am offering you a way out of this town," Isaac said. "A place to go where people will not judge you for defending yourself. I will not lie to you, it is a hard life in the mountains. The winters are brutal and you have to be tough to survive. But I would make sure you had everything you needed. Food, shelter, safety." "Why would you do that?" Zelda asked, and there was suspicion in her voice now, the wariness of a woman who had learned that men rarely offered something for nothing. Isaac met her eyes steadily. "Because your father was a good man who did not deserve what happened to him. Because you deserve better than what this town is offering you. And because I remember what it feels like to have nowhere to go and no one to turn to." There was truth in his words, raw and honest. Zelda studied his face, looking for deception, for the hidden motive. But all she saw was kindness and a bone-deep weariness that matched her own. "I do not know you," she said finally. "No, you do not, and you do not have to trust me right now, but I am leaving tomorrow morning at first light. If you want to come with me, meet me at the north end of town by the old mill. If you do not show up, I will understand and I will not bother you again." "Just like that?" "Just like that," Isaac agreed. He tipped his hat to her. "Think about it, Miss Jameson. You have my word that I would treat you with nothing but respect." He turned and walked away before she could respond, heading toward the boarding house where he had rented a room for the night. His heart was pounding in a way it had not in years, and he was not entirely sure what he had just done. He had offered to take a complete stranger up to his isolated cabin in the mountains, a young woman with a reputation for violence, and he had done it on impulse. But it had not felt like an impulse. It had felt like the most right thing he had done in a very long time. Zelda watched him go, her mind spinning. She did not know Isaac Thornton, not really. She knew of him, the way everyone in Truckee knew of the mountain man who came down from the high country every few months. He had always been polite to her father, had always paid his bills on time, had never caused trouble. Her father had liked him, and Thomas Jameson had been an excellent judge of character. But to go with him alone, to a cabin miles from civilization, that was dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with physical safety. What if he was not the gentleman he seemed? What if he expected things from her that she was not willing to give? Yet, what choice did she have? Sacramento was 3 days away by stagecoach, and the ticket would take most of her savings. Once there, she would be alone in a city where she knew no one, trying to find work with no references and no connections. At least here, at least with Isaac Thornton, she would have a roof over her head and food in her belly while she figured out her next move. She walked slowly back to the room above the shop, her mind churning. That night she barely slept. She kept thinking about the crowd's cruel words, about the way the other women had looked at her with disgust and fear. She thought about her father, about the way he had always told her to be strong, to never let anyone make her feel small. And she thought about Isaac Thornton, about the way he had stepped into that crowd without hesitation, about the quiet respect in his voice when he spoke to her. By the time the sun began to rise, painting the Sierra Nevada peaks in shades of gold and pink, Zelda had made her decision. She packed her few belongings into a carpet bag, took one last look around the small room that had been her home, and walked out. She did not look back. Looking back would only make it harder, and she needed all her strength for what came next. The old mill was at the north end of town, a crumbling structure that had not been used in years. Zelda arrived just as the sun cleared the mountains, and she half expected to find the place empty, to discover that Isaac Thornton had changed his mind, or that the whole thing had been some kind of cruel joke. But he was there, standing beside a sturdy pack horse loaded with supplies. His own horse, a big bay gelding, stood patiently beside him. Isaac was dressed for travel, his buckskin jacket open despite the morning chill, and when he saw her approaching, his face lit up with a smile that transformed him from formidable to something approaching handsome. "You came," he said, and there was genuine pleasure in his voice. "I did," Zelda confirmed. She set her carpetbag down, suddenly uncertain. "I want to make something clear, Mr. Thornton. If I come with you, it is as an employee, nothing more. I will work for my keep, but I will not be offering anything else." Isaac nodded seriously. "I understand, Miss Jameson. And I want you to know, I am not expecting anything from you except honest work. You will have your own space in the cabin, and your privacy will be respected. You have my word on that." "Your word," Zelda repeated. "My word," Isaac confirmed. "And if at any point you want to leave, I will bring you back to town, no questions asked. You are not a prisoner, you are making a choice, and you can unmake it whenever you want." That eased something in Zelda's chest, some tight knot of fear that had been building since she woke.
"All right then. I am ready when you are."
Isaac's smile widened, and he moved to help her secure her bag to the pack horse. His hands were enormous, scarred from years of hard work, but they were gentle as he adjusted the straps. Up close, Zelda could see the fine lines around his eyes, the silver beginning to thread through his dark hair. He smelled like leather and pine and wood smoke, clean and masculine. "It is about a 7-hour ride," Isaac said as he helped her mount the bay gelding. She had ridden before, though not often, and she was grateful that the horse seemed calm and well-trained. Isaac would walk alongside, leading the pack horse. "We will stop for lunch around midday. The trail gets steep in places, so just let Thunder know what you need. He is a good horse, very steady." "Thunder?" Zelda asked, patting the gelding's neck. "He was born during a lightning storm." Isaac explained with a small smile. Seemed fitting. They set out just as the town was beginning to wake, and Zelda felt a weight lift from her shoulders with every mile they put between themselves and Truckee. The morning was cool and beautiful, the air scented with pine and earth. Birds sang in the trees, and somewhere in the distance she could hear the rush of a creek swollen with snowmelt. Isaac set a steady pace, not pushing but not dawdling either. He pointed out landmarks as they went, a distinctive rock formation, a lightning-scarred tree, a meadow where elk liked to graze. He spoke easily, his voice a pleasant rumble, but he also seemed comfortable with silence, which Zelda appreciated. She was not ready to talk about what had happened, about the shooting or the aftermath, or any of it. They stopped around noon in a clearing beside a stream. Isaac helped her down from Thunder, and Zelda's legs were shaky after hours in the saddle. She walked around for a few minutes, working out the stiffness, while Isaac unpacked some bread and dried meat and cheese for lunch. They sat on a fallen log and ate in companionable quiet, the sound of the water providing a peaceful backdrop. Zelda realized that for the first time in days she felt almost calm. The constant whispers and stares were gone, replaced by the simple sounds of the forest. "How much further?" she asked eventually. "Another 4 hours or so," Isaac said. "The trail gets rougher from here, steeper. But Thunder can handle it, and you built your cabin up there yourself?" "Over the course of 2 summers," Isaac confirmed. "It is solid, tight against the weather. 2 rooms, a main living area and a smaller bedroom. There is a root cellar for storage and a creek runs close by for water. I have traps set in a circuit about 5 miles out, and I check them every few days. In the summer, I have a garden and I hunt year-round. It is a good life, if a simple one." "Do you ever get lonely?" Zelda asked, then immediately regretted the personal question. But Isaac did not seem offended. "Sometimes," he admitted, "especially in the deep winter when the snow is too heavy to travel. But I chose this life, and mostly I am content with it. I like the quiet. After the war, I found I could not abide crowds anymore." "You were a soldier? Union Army?" Isaac said. Fought for 3 years, came home to find my parents dead from fever and the farm sold for taxes. I tried to settle back into regular life, but it did not take. So I came west, ended up in these mountains, and found my peace. Zelda heard the pain beneath the simple words, the weight of experiences he did not elaborate on. She understood that kind of pain, the kind that lived in your bones and changed you forever. I am sorry, she said quietly. It was a long time ago, Isaac replied. But his eyes were distant, looking at something she could not see. Then he shook himself slightly and stood, offering her his hand. We should keep moving. I want to get home before dark. The afternoon portion of the journey was indeed more challenging. The trail narrowed and climbed steeply, winding through dense forest and across rocky slopes. Zelda clung to Thunder's mane more than once, her heart in her throat, but the horse never faltered. Isaac walked ahead, sure-footed as a mountain goat, occasionally glancing back to check on her. As the sun began its descent toward the western peaks, they crested a final ridge, and Isaac stopped, gesturing ahead. There. That is home. Zelda looked where he pointed and saw a cabin nestled in a small valley, surrounded by towering pines. Smoke rose from the chimney, which confused her for a moment, until she realized Isaac must have banked the fire before he left, keeping coals alive. The cabin was larger than she expected, built from sturdy logs with a shake roof. There was a small barn beside it, and she could see the garden plot he had mentioned, though it was still early in the season and nothing was growing yet. It was beautiful, isolated and wild, but also somehow welcoming. The valley was lush with spring growth, and the last rays of sunlight turned everything golden. It is lovely, Zelda said honestly, and Isaac's face broke into a pleased smile. Come on, he said. Let us get you settled. The inside of the cabin was as solid as the outside, all clean lines and practical construction. The main room held a large stone fireplace, a rough-hewn table with 2 chairs, shelves lined with supplies and tools, and a comfortable-looking bed in one corner. The second room, which Isaac showed her with obvious pride, was smaller but still spacious, with a narrow bed, a chest for storage, and a window that looked out over the valley. This will be your room, Isaac said. I will sleep out in the main room. There is a bar for the door if you want extra security, though I promise you will not need it. Zelda set her carpet bag on the bed, looking around. The room was simple but clean, and the bed had a thick quilt that looked handmade. Did you make that? She asked, pointing to the quilt. Isaac actually looked a bit sheepish. I did. Winter nights are long. I needed something to do with my hands. The thought of this large, rough man patiently stitching a quilt made something warm bloom in Zelda's chest. It is beautiful work. Thank you, Isaac said. He cleared his throat. I will go tend to the horses and get a proper fire going. You take your time, settle in. There is a basin and pitcher for washing, and I will heat water for a bath later if you want. He left her alone, and Zelda sank onto the bed, suddenly exhausted. The events of the past few days, the long ride, the emotional weight of everything, it all crashed over her at once. She lay back on the quilt and closed her eyes just for a moment. When she woke, the room was dark except for lamplight spilling in from the main room. She could hear Isaac moving around, the clank of pots, the crackle of the fire. The smell of cooking meat made her stomach growl, reminding her that the small lunch had been hours ago. Zelda stood and smoothed her dress, then ventured out into the main room. Isaac was at the fireplace, stirring something in a large pot. He had taken off his jacket and his shirt sleeves were rolled up, revealing forearms corded with muscle. I apologize, Zelda said. I did not mean to fall asleep. No need to apologize, Isaac said easily. You needed the rest. I am making stew. It is not fancy, but it is filling. They ate together at the table, the stew rich with venison and root vegetables. Isaac had also made biscuits, which were surprisingly good. Zelda found herself relaxing in his presence, the initial awkwardness fading. He asked her about her father, about what it was like growing up in Truckee, and he listened with genuine interest to her answers. In turn, she learned more about him. He had grown up on a farm in Ohio, the youngest of 4 brothers. His parents had been kind but strict, and he had learned early the value of hard work. The war had scattered his family, and by the time it ended, he was the only one left. His brothers had all died, 2 at Antietam and 1 at Gettysburg. I am the only Thornton left, Isaac said quietly. Sometimes I think about that, about how a whole family line could just end. But then I think maybe it does not have to. Maybe there is still time to build something new. Zelda did not know what to say to that, so she said nothing, just reached across the table and briefly touched his hand. Isaac looked at her, and something passed between them, an understanding, a recognition of shared loss. That first night set the pattern for the days that followed. Zelda settled into life in the mountains with surprising ease. She took over the cooking and the cleaning, tasks she had done for her father and now did for Isaac. But it felt different here, less like drudgery and more like partnership. Isaac hunted and checked his traps, chopped wood, and repaired things around the cabin. They worked together on the garden, turning the soil and planting seeds. The days were long and filled with physical labor, but Zelda found she did not mind. The work kept her hands busy and her mind occupied, leaving little room for the dark thoughts that had plagued her in Truckee. And slowly, so slowly she barely noticed at first, the nightmares began to fade. She stopped waking in the middle of the night, with her father's screams echoing in her ears, stopped seeing the blood every time she closed her eyes. Isaac was patient with her, never pushing, never asking for more than she was willing to give. He treated her with unfailing respect, always knocking before entering a room she was in, always keeping a careful distance. But there were moments, small moments, when their hands would brush passing a plate, or when she would catch him watching her with something soft in his eyes. 3 weeks after she arrived, Zelda was hanging laundry outside when she heard a horse approaching. She froze, fear spiking through her. No one should be out here. Isaac was checking his traps and would not be back until evening, but when the rider came into view, she relaxed slightly. It was an older man, weathered and grizzled, leading a pack horse loaded with furs. He saw her and raised a hand in greeting. "Afternoon, miss," he called. "Name is Jeremiah Cole. I am looking for Isaac Thornton." "He is not here right now," Zelda said, staying near the cabin door. "He should be back in a few hours." Jeremiah nodded, studying her with open curiosity. "You must be the woman from Truckee. Word travels, even up here. Isaac stopped by my place on his way back up the mountain last month, mentioned he was bringing someone to help with the cabin." "I am Zelda Jameson," she said, relaxing a fraction. If Isaac knew this man, he was probably safe. "Pleasure to meet you, Miss Jameson," Jeremiah said. He dismounted stiffly, and Zelda could see he was older than she first thought, probably in his 60s. "I was hoping to trade with Isaac, but I can wait. Would you mind if I rested my horse and filled my canteen?" "Of course," Zelda said. "Please, come in. I just made coffee." Jeremiah followed her inside, looking around the cabin with approval. "Place looks better than the last time I was here. You have been busy." They sat at the table, and Zelda poured coffee. Jeremiah told her about his own cabin, about 15 miles west, and about the other few men scattered through these mountains, hermits and trappers mostly, each carving out their own solitary existence. "It is a hard life," Jeremiah said, "but some of us are suited for it. Isaac, he is one of the good ones. Quiet, keeps to himself, but he would give you the shirt off his back if you needed it. You are lucky to have found your way to him. He found me," Zelda corrected. "I was in a bad situation and he offered me a way out." "That sounds like Isaac," Jeremiah agreed. He studied her over his coffee cup. "You settling in all right?" "Mountain life ain't for everyone, especially women. It can be lonely." "I like the quiet," Zelda said. "And Isaac is good company when he is here. Better than the people in town, certainly." Jeremiah nodded knowingly. "I heard about what happened to your father. Bad business. But you did what you had to do, and anyone with sense knows it. Not everyone sees it that way." "Then not everyone has sense," Jeremiah said bluntly. "You defended yourself and your kin. That is honorable." Isaac returned just before sunset, and his face lit up when he saw Jeremiah's horse outside. The two men greeted each other warmly, clearly old friends, and spent the evening talking and trading Jeremiah's furs for some of Isaac's supplies. Zelda cooked dinner for all three of them, and she found herself enjoying the company, the easy camaraderie between the two men. Before Jeremiah left the next morning, he pulled Zelda aside. "You take care of that man," he said quietly. "He has been alone too long, and it was making him hard. But I can already see the difference in him just having you here. He smiles more." Zelda did not know what to say to that, but she thought about it long after Jeremiah rode away. She had noticed changes in Isaac too, subtle shifts. He laughed more easily now, told her stories about his childhood, asked her opinion on things, and she realized that she was changing too, that the tight ball of fear and anger she had been carrying since her father's death was slowly unraveling. Summer came to the high country in a rush of wildflowers and warm breezes. The garden flourished under their care, and Isaac brought home deer and rabbit and even a black bear, which they butchered together and stored for the winter ahead. Zelda learned to cure meat and make pemmican, skills Isaac taught her with patient hands. They fell into an easy rhythm, like two parts of a well-oiled machine. Mornings were for chores, afternoons for whatever project needed attention, and evenings were spent by the fire, talking or reading from the small collection of books Isaac owned. Sometimes they would sit in comfortable silence, Isaac whittling while Zelda mended clothes or worked on her own quilt project. It was during one of these quiet evenings in late July that something shifted. A summer storm had rolled in, bringing thunder and lightning and sheets of rain. Isaac had closed the shutters against the wind, and the cabin felt small and cozy, the fire casting dancing shadows on the walls. Zelda was darning one of Isaac's socks, concentrating on the delicate work, when she looked up to find him watching her with an expression she had never seen before, open and vulnerable. "What is it?" she asked softly. Isaac hesitated, then set down the piece of wood he had been working on. "I have been thinking," he said, "about the day I brought you here, about what I said in town." "What about it?" "I told you that you could leave any time you wanted, that you were not a prisoner. That is still true. But I realize now that I was not entirely honest, not with you and not with myself." Zelda set down her mending, her heart beginning to race. "What do you mean?" "I brought you here because I wanted to help you. That part was true, but it was not the only reason." Isaac leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his hands clasped together. "The truth is, from the moment I saw you standing in that street, taking all that hate and judgment and still holding your head high, I knew you were special. I knew I wanted to know you better, and these past months, living with you, working beside you, I have come to care for you deeply." Zelda's breath caught. She had felt the connection between them growing, had noticed the way her heart leapt when he came home each evening, the way she looked forward to their conversations. But she had told herself it was just gratitude, just the natural result of him saving her when she had nowhere else to turn. "Isaac," she started, but he held up a hand. "Please let me finish. I am not asking you for anything. I just need you to know how I feel. You have brought life back to this cabin, back to me. I was just existing before, going through the motions, but now I look forward to each day because I know I will see you, talk to you. You have become the most important person in my world, Zelda, and I needed you to know that." "Why are you telling me this?" Zelda asked, though she thought she knew. "Because I cannot keep it inside anymore," Isaac said simply, "and because you deserve to know the truth. If it makes things difficult, if you want to leave because of it, I will take you back to town tomorrow. But I am tired of hiding how I feel." Zelda stood and walked to the window, looking out at the rain, her mind racing. She had spent so long protecting herself, building walls to keep people out. But Isaac had somehow slipped past her defenses without her even noticing. She trusted him in a way she had not trusted anyone since her father died. More than that, she had come to depend on him, not just for survival but for companionship, for the way he made her laugh, for the sense of safety she felt in his presence. And yes, she cared for him. She more than cared for him. "I am afraid," she said finally, turning to face him. "I am afraid of what it means to care for someone again. I lost my father, and it nearly destroyed me. What if I lose you, too?" Isaac stood and crossed to her, stopping just within arm's reach. "You could lose me," he admitted. "Life in the mountains is dangerous. I could get mauled by a bear or fall off a cliff or freeze in a blizzard. But Zelda, you could also lose me to old age 50 years from now, after a long and happy life together. Fear of loss is no reason to deny yourself happiness. Is that what you are offering me, happiness?" "I am offering you everything I have," Isaac said. "My home, my protection, my heart. I am offering you a life together if you want it. I am offering you love." Zelda felt tears prick her eyes, but for the first time in months they were not tears of grief or fear. They were tears of hope, of possibility. "I do not know how to do this," she whispered. "I have never been in love before. Neither have I," Isaac said with a small smile. "We will figure it out together." He reached out slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, and gently cupped her face in his large, calloused hands. His touch was infinitely tender, and Zelda leaned into it, closing her eyes. "I care for you too," she said, the words feeling both terrifying and freeing. "I did not want to, but I do. You make me feel safe and valued and seen. I look forward to your return every day. I dream about you at night. I think I have been falling in love with you for weeks, but I was too scared to admit it." "You do not have to be scared," Isaac murmured. "Not here, not with me." He leaned down slowly, and Zelda rose on her toes to meet him. Their first kiss was soft and sweet, a gentle exploration. Isaac's lips were warm, and he tasted like the coffee they had shared after dinner. Zelda felt something unfurl in her chest, something she had not known was coiled tight, and she sighed against his mouth. When they pulled apart, Isaac rested his forehead against hers, and they stood like that for a long moment, just breathing together, the storm raging outside forgotten. "So what happens now?" Zelda asked eventually. "Now we live," Isaac said. "We work and laugh and build a life together. And when you are ready, when enough time has passed and you are sure of your feelings, I would like to marry you." "Marry me?" Zelda pulled back to look at him. "You want to marry me?" "More than I have ever wanted anything," Isaac confirmed. "But I am not rushing you. We have time. I just want you to know my intentions are honorable." Zelda laughed, a real laugh, bright and genuine. "Isaac Thornton, are you courting me?" "I suppose I am," he said with a grin. "Is that all right with you?" "Yes," Zelda said, and kissed him again, longer this time, deeper. "Yes, that is more than all right with me." The summer passed in a blur of work and laughter and stolen kisses. Isaac courted her the way men must have courted women 100 years ago, with old-fashioned chivalry and sweet gestures. He brought her wildflowers from the high meadows, carved her a beautiful jewelry box from cedar wood, taught her to fish in the creek. They would sit together in the evenings and he would read to her from his books, his deep voice turning poetry into music. Zelda blossomed under his attention. The haunted look left her eyes, replaced by genuine joy. She sang while she worked, decorated the cabin with pretty stones and interesting branches, planted herbs in little pots by the kitchen window. She felt like she was becoming herself again, or maybe becoming a new version of herself, one who had survived tragedy and found love on the other side. In late August, Isaac took her to a hidden lake high in the mountains, a full day's ride from the cabin. They camped beside the crystal-clear water, and that night, under a sky full of stars, Isaac asked her to marry him properly, with a ring he had carved from a piece of elk horn. "I know we have only known each other a few months," he said, "but I am certain you are the one I have been waiting for all my life. Will you marry me, Zelda? Will you be my wife?" "Yes," Zelda said without hesitation. "Yes, Isaac, I will marry you." They made love for the first time that night, tender and slow, learning each other's bodies with gentle hands and whispered words. Isaac was patient and careful, making sure she felt safe and cherished. Zelda had been nervous, but with him everything felt right. She fell asleep in his arms, his large body curved protectively around hers, and woke to the sun rising over the lake and Isaac kissing her shoulder. They returned to the cabin as an engaged couple and immediately began planning a trip to town. They would need to see the preacher, file the proper paperwork, make their union legal. Isaac was nervous about taking Zelda back to Truckee, worried about how people would treat her, but she insisted she was ready. "I am not the same woman who left," she told him. "I am stronger now, and I will have you beside me. I can face anything with you beside me." They rode down from the mountains in early September, as the aspens were beginning to turn gold. Truckee looked the same as it had 5 months ago, but Zelda felt entirely different. She rode beside Isaac, her head high, her hand occasionally reaching out to touch his arm for reassurance. The town noticed them immediately. People stopped and stared as they rode down the main street. The mountain man and the woman no one thought would ever be claimed by any decent man. Zelda could hear the whispers starting, but before they could grow into the same vicious mockery as before, Isaac stopped thunder right in the middle of the street. Several men had gathered outside the saloon, including some of the same ones who had jeered at Zelda months before. One of them, emboldened by afternoon drinking, called out loud enough for half the street to hear. "Well, look who came crawling back. Guess no man wanted to claim damaged goods after all." The others laughed, cruel and mocking. "No man will ever claim her," someone else shouted, and the laughter grew louder. Isaac dismounted slowly, his face calm but his eyes hard as flint. He walked to Zelda and helped her down from her horse, then turned to face the crowd. His voice, when he spoke, was not loud, but it carried clearly in the sudden silence. "I already have," Isaac said, and there was quiet pride in his words. "She is coming home. We are just here to make it legal." He pulled Zelda close to his side, his arm around her waist in a gesture of clear possession and protection. "This woman is going to be my wife. She is brave and strong and kind, and I am honored that she agreed to marry me. Any one of you would be lucky to have someone like her, but you were too blind and too cruel to see what was right in front of you." The crowd was silent now, shocked. Several people had the grace to look ashamed. "Furthermore," Isaac continued, "if I hear that anyone has spoken ill of her, if I hear that anyone has caused her any trouble, you will answer to me. Is that understood?" No one argued. Isaac might not be a violent man, but he was a formidable one, and everyone there knew it. The preacher, Reverend Matthews, stepped forward from the small crowd that had gathered. He was an older man with kind eyes, and he looked at Zelda with something approaching apology. Miss Jameson, Mr. Thornton, I would be honored to perform your wedding ceremony. If you would like, we could do it right now today. I think this town owes you that much. Isaac looked at Zelda, letting her decide. She thought about saying no, about making them wait, but then she realized she did not want to wait another moment. She wanted to be Isaac's wife officially and legally. She wanted the whole world to know that she belonged to him and he belonged to her. Yes, she said clearly. Let us do it now. The ceremony was held right there in the street in front of God and half of Truckee. Reverend Matthew spoke the traditional words, and Isaac repeated his vows in a strong, steady voice, promising to love and honor and protect Zelda for all his days. When it was her turn, Zelda's voice rang out just as clearly, promising to love and cherish and stand beside Isaac through whatever came. I now pronounce you man and wife, Reverend Matthew said with a smile. You may kiss your bride. Isaac pulled Zelda into his arms and kissed her thoroughly, right there in the middle of the street. A few people applauded, hesitantly at first, but then more enthusiastically. When they finally pulled apart, Zelda was blushing and laughing, and Isaac looked happier than she had ever seen him. They spent one night in town, at the boarding house, in a proper room as husband and wife. Isaac made love to her again, less tentatively this time, and Zelda reveled in the feeling of being wanted, being loved. In the morning they bought more supplies and headed back up to the mountains to their home. That winter was long and hard, with storms that buried the cabin in snow taller than Isaac. But inside they were warm and safe and happy. Zelda learned to bake bread in the Dutch oven, to make soap from lion fat, to tan leather. Isaac taught her to shoot his rifle, to track game, to read the weather in the clouds. They talked for hours about everything and nothing. Isaac told her about his childhood, about his brothers, about the war and the things he had seen. Zelda told him about her mother, who had died when she was young, about her father's dreams for her future, about the fear and anger she had felt after the shooting. They healed together. Two broken people becoming whole. Spring came again, and with it a surprise. Zelda realized she was pregnant. She told Isaac one evening in March, nervous about how he would react. They had not planned for children so soon, though they had talked about wanting them eventually. Isaac's face went through a series of expressions: shock, wonder, and finally pure joy. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing like a child. We are going to have a baby, he kept saying. Zelda, we are going to have a baby. Are you happy, she asked, though she could see that he was. Happy does not even begin to cover it, Isaac said, setting her down gently and placing his large hand on her still flat stomach. This is everything I have ever wanted, a family of my own, a child, to raise and love. Thank you, Zelda. Thank you for giving me this. The pregnancy was not easy. Morning sickness plagued her for months, and as she grew larger, the simple tasks of daily life became more challenging. But Isaac was attentive and patient, taking over more of the work, making sure she rested. He read to her in the evenings, his hand on her belly, talking to their unborn child. In late October, as the first snows were beginning to dust the high peaks, Zelda went into labor. Isaac had planned for this, had made arrangements with a midwife from a settlement 20 miles away to come stay with them as Zelda's time drew near. But the baby came early, and the midwife had not yet arrived. Isaac delivered his own son, his hands steady despite his fear. The baby came into the world, screaming and healthy, with a shock of dark hair and his father's strong lungs. Isaac cut the cord with shaking hands, wrapped his son in clean cloth, and placed him in Zelda's arms. He is perfect, Zelda whispered, exhausted but radiant. Isaac, he is absolutely perfect, just like his mother, Isaac said, kissing her forehead. Tears streamed down his face, unashamed. What should we name him? They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy, but nothing had felt quite right. Now, looking at her son's tiny face, Zelda knew. Thomas, she said, after my father. Thomas Jameson Thornton. Thomas, Isaac repeated, testing the name. I like it, Thomas Thornton. He would have been proud, your father. Proud of you, proud to have his grandson carry his name. The midwife arrived 2 days later and pronounced both mother and baby healthy. She stayed for a week, teaching Zelda how to nurse and care for the infant, and then she was gone again, leaving them to settle into their new life as a family. Thomas was a good baby, quick to smile and generally content. Isaac was completely besotted, would spend hours just holding his son, watching him sleep, marveling at his tiny fingers and toes. He built a beautiful cradle from pine, carved with animals and trees, and sang off-key lullabies that made Zelda laugh. Life was full and busy and wonderful. Some days were hard, the work never ending and the isolation sometimes pressing. But they had each other, and that was enough. When Thomas was 6 months old, Jeremiah stopped by with news. Cyrus Blackwell, the rancher whose nephew Zelda had killed, had died of a heart attack. His land and holdings were being divided among various relatives, and the whole matter of his nephew's death had been quietly forgotten. "You are in the clear," Jeremiah told them. "Not that it much matters up here, but I thought you would want to know. You could go back to town without worry if you wanted." "This is our home," Isaac said, looking around the cabin with satisfaction. "We have no need to go anywhere," Zelda agreed. The mountains had become her sanctuary, and the cabin was filled with love and laughter and life. She had no desire to return to the judgmental confines of town. The years passed in a pleasant rhythm. Thomas grew from a baby to a toddler to a sturdy little boy who looked just like his father. He was followed by a daughter, Emma, with her mother's auburn hair and green eyes, and then another son, Samuel, who was quieter and more thoughtful than his boisterous siblings. Isaac expanded the cabin, adding another room for the children, and later a small addition for himself and Zelda, giving them privacy. He taught his sons to hunt and trap and track, to read and cipher and work with their hands. Zelda taught Emma all the domestic skills, but also to shoot and ride, determined that her daughter would be strong and capable. They made trips to town once or twice a year, more now that the children needed things that could not be made at home. The people of Truckee had long since accepted the mountain man and his wife, and the story of how they came together had become something of a legend. Young couples would sometimes stop them to hear the story firsthand, to hear how Isaac had defended Zelda and claimed her as his own. On those trips, Isaac would always make a point to visit Thomas Jameson's grave, to lay flowers and tell his father-in-law about his grandchildren. Zelda would stand beside him, her hand in his, and feel nothing but gratitude for the journey that had brought her here. When Thomas, their eldest, was 10 years old, a young couple appeared at their cabin one summer day. The woman was bruised and frightened, running from an abusive husband. She had heard about the Thorntons, about how they had found safety and love in the mountains, and she was looking for the same. Isaac and Zelda took her in without hesitation, gave her shelter and food and time to heal. When she was ready, they helped her file for divorce, a scandalous thing but necessary. And when a gentle trapper named William came by that winter and fell in love with the young woman, they hosted the wedding in their cabin and sent the couple off with their blessing. It became a pattern over the years. People who needed help, who needed a fresh start, found their way to the Thornton cabin. Isaac and Zelda never turned anyone away. They gave what they could, advice or supplies or just a listening ear. Their home became known as a place of refuge, of second chances. The children grew, strong and healthy and happy. Thomas inherited his father's size and strength. Emma her mother's quick mind and quicker tongue, and Samuel a combination of both, steady and thoughtful. They each married in time, brought home spouses who fell in love with the mountain life, and soon there were grandchildren running through the valley. Isaac and Zelda grew older together, his hair turning silver, her face gaining laugh lines, but the love between them never dimmed. If anything, it grew stronger, tempered by years of facing challenges together, of building a life from nothing, of raising children and weathering storms both literal and metaphorical. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Isaac took Zelda back to the hidden lake where he had proposed. They were grayer now, slower, but their hands fit together just as well as they had that first night. "Do you have any regrets?" Isaac asked as they sat by the water, watching the sunset paint the sky in impossible colors. "Not a single one," Zelda said honestly. "That day you offered to bring me here was the best thing that ever happened to me. You saved my life, Isaac. Not just from the situation in town, but from myself. You taught me to live again, to love again. How could I regret any of that?" "I was so nervous that morning," Isaac admitted. "I almost talked myself out of going to the mill. I thought you would not come, that the offer was too bold, too presumptuous. But I could not shake the feeling that you were meant to be mine, that we were meant to find each other." "We were," Zelda agreed. She leaned her head on his shoulder, still broad despite the years. "I think my father would have liked you. I think he would have been happy, knowing I found someone who loves me the way you do." "I think so too," Isaac said. He kissed the top of her head. "I have loved you from that very first day, standing in the street with your chin up despite everything. I will love you until my last breath, Zelda Thornton. And I will love you just as long," Zelda promised. They stayed at the lake for 3 days, enjoying the quiet and the chance to be alone together. When they returned home, it was to a cabin full of children and grandchildren, to the noise and chaos of family, and it was perfect. More years passed. Isaac's joints grew stiff from decades of hard labor, and Zelda's eyes weakened so she needed spectacles to read. But they remained active and engaged, still working the land, still welcoming visitors, still deeply in love. Thomas, their son, took over more of the heavy work, and he and his wife moved into a cabin they built just down the valley. Emma and her husband did the same on the other side, and Samuel built his home near the creek. The valley that had once held just one cabin now held 5, a small family compound in the wilderness. Isaac loved it, loved being surrounded by the legacy he and Zelda had built. On warm summer evenings, the whole family would gather at the original cabin, the children playing while the adults talked and laughed. Isaac would sit in the chair he had built 30 years before, Zelda beside him, and feel complete. One evening when Isaac was 65 and Zelda 57, they sat on the porch watching a particularly beautiful sunset. The valley was quiet, the grandchildren having been taken home to bed, and it was just the two of them. "I have been thinking," Zelda said softly, "about that day in Truckee when the crowd was jeering. Do you remember what they said? That no man would ever claim you," Isaac said. "I remember. They were wrong," Zelda said, "so completely wrong. Because you claimed me, Isaac, and more than that, I claimed you right back. We claimed each other and we built something beautiful together. The most beautiful thing I have ever known," Isaac agreed. His hand found hers, their fingers interlacing with long practice. "You are the best part of my life, Zelda. Everything good I have, everything I am, comes from you." "We did it together," Zelda corrected. "Everything we have, we built together." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun dipped below the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink and purple. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hooted, beginning its nightly hunt. The creek burbled over stones, the same creek that had run beside the cabin for all these years. "Do you think we will have many more years?" Zelda asked. It was not a morbid question, just practical. They were both aware that time was running shorter, that each day was a gift. "I hope so," Isaac said. "But whether it is 1 year or 20, I will spend every moment grateful that I found you, that you said yes, that you chose to build this life with me." "There was never any other choice," Zelda said. "From the moment you stood up to that crowd, from the moment you offered me a way out, I think my heart knew. It just took my head a while to catch up." Isaac laughed, the sound warm and rich. "I am glad your head caught up eventually." "So am I," Zelda said, and kissed him tender and sweet. They lived another 15 years, Isaac passing peacefully in his sleep at 80, Zelda following him just 2 years later at 74. They were buried side by side in a small plot in the valley they loved, under the shade of a towering pine. Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren gathered to mourn them, but also to celebrate the incredible life they had lived together. The story of Isaac and Zelda Thornton became part of local legend, passed down through generations. People told it different ways, but the core remained the same. A mountain man had seen a woman in trouble, had recognized her strength and worth when no one else would, and had claimed her as his own, and she, in turn, had claimed him right back. Their original cabin stood for decades after their deaths, maintained by their descendants as a reminder of where it all started. Young couples would sometimes hike up to see it, to stand in the place where two broken people had found each other and built something lasting. The valley itself became known as Thornton Valley, appearing on maps and trail guides. It remained wild and beautiful, protected by the family that bore the name, a testament to the enduring power of love and the second chances that can arise from even the darkest circumstances. The pine tree that sheltered their graves grew tall and strong, its roots deep in the mountain soil. Wildflowers bloomed there every spring, and in the summer, the sunlight filtered through the branches to dapple the ground with gold. It was a peaceful place, a fitting rest for two people who had lived with courage and loved with their whole hearts. And sometimes, on quiet evenings, when the wind moved through the valley just right, you could almost hear them, the mountain man and his wife, laughing together, their love echoing through the mountains they had called home. Their story had ended, but the legacy they built together, the family they raised, the love they shared, that would go on forever, passed down from generation to generation. A reminder that sometimes the most beautiful things in life come from the most unexpected places. The Thorntons' descendants continued to thrive in the valley and beyond. Some stayed in the mountains, carrying on the tradition of living close to the land, while others ventured into the changing world, carrying the values their ancestors had instilled with them. But they all remembered the story, all knew where they came from, all understood that they were the product of a love that had defied expectations and stood the test of time. And in Truckee, where it all began, the story was remembered too. The town had grown and changed over the decades, but old-timers would still tell the tale of the day a mountain man had stood up to a jeering crowd and claimed the woman they said no one would ever want. They told it to young people who were going through hard times, who thought they would never find love or acceptance, as a reminder that circumstances can change, that redemption is possible, that love can bloom in the most unlikely places. The legacy of Isaac and Zelda Thornton was not just in their children or their land or even their story. It was in the hope they represented, the proof that people could overcome tragedy, find love, build a life worth living. They had started with nothing but each other, two damaged souls finding solace in the wilderness. And they had created something beautiful and lasting. Years turned into decades, and decades into a century. The Wild West that Isaac and Zelda had known faded into history, replaced by modern conveniences and changing times. But in Thornton Valley, some things remained constant. The mountains still stood tall and proud, the creek still ran clear and cold, and the descendants of two people who had found each other against all odds still walked the same paths, still breathed the same mountain air. The original cabin was eventually restored and preserved as a historical site, a small museum to the past. Visitors could walk through the rooms where Isaac and Zelda had lived and loved, could see the cradle Isaac had carved for his firstborn son, could read the letters they had written to each other during the rare times they were apart. It was a glimpse into a different time, a different way of life, but the emotions that poured from those artifacts were timeless. Love, hope, determination, faith. These were the qualities that had sustained Isaac and Zelda through all their years together, and these were the qualities that their story continued to inspire in everyone who heard it. They had proved that no matter how dark the circumstances, no matter how cruel the world could be, love could still flourish. Two people, committed to each other and to building a life together, could overcome anything. And so the story lived on, told and retold, adapted and embellished, but never losing its core truth. A mountain man had seen a woman that others had rejected, had recognized her worth, and had claimed her as his own. Not in a possessive way, but in a partnership, a claiming that went both ways. They had chosen each other, and that choice had shaped not just their own lives, but the lives of everyone who came after them. In the end, that was the real legacy of Isaac and Zelda Thornton. Not the land they had settled or the children they had raised, though those were important. The real legacy was the example they had set. The proof that love could triumph over adversity, that second chances were possible, that two people who refused to give up on each other could build something that would last long after they were gone. The mountains remembered them, the valley held their memory, and the family they had created carried their story forward, generation after generation, a testament to the enduring power of love and the courage it takes to claim it, to hold it, to nurture it into something that will outlast time itself. Isaac and Zelda had lived and loved and built their happily ever after in a cabin in the mountains, far from the cruel voices that had once sought to define them. They had proved those voices wrong, had lived a life richer and fuller than anyone could have imagined, and in doing so, they had created a legacy that would inspire people for generations to come, a reminder that love, true love, could overcome anything, could transform everything, could last forever.